Hello, and welcome to the Project Discovery Plus video study guide for By the Queen. In this video, we hopped on Zoom for a conversation with the three portrayals of Queen Margaret in preparation for our Project Discovery students to see this world premiere play.
Hello, I'm Fiona McGuire. I use she and they pronouns, and I am the youngest Margaret 1.
Hi, I'm Rachel Christopher. I use the she series pronouns, and I play Margaret 2, who's described as being in her dirty 30s. So I play the 30-year-old Margaret.
And I'm Paula Plum. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and I am described as being fabulous.
In this show, there are three portrayals of Queen Margaret. Describe your Margaret. What impact does your Margaret have on this story?
My Margaret is experiencing a lot of things for the first time, I think. Both because she is, we meet her where Shakespeare meets her, so we don't really, so it's kind of, even though she's already 16 at the time, we don't really see how she got to where she is, but I think then in the moment we meet her, she is swept into a very new world of people, places, and things. One of her big roles in the play that I think is not as clear as her role in the first section of like, I am experiencing and I'm stuck in the Shakespeare world, is then just to watch in almost this like dreamlike state of how your life is going to unfold and what would that be like to actually see what you're going to do and wonder if you can change what you have to do.
Margaret 2 is a Margaret who knows a little bit more, just because by virtue of being older and a bit more experienced. In our version of this play, Margaret 2 really comes into political power and independence, learns what independence really means. She grows up a little bit more, and I think she also really learns what loneliness means in that particular time in her life.
Margaret 3 is the old Margaret, but the way Whitney White has created her, she's very upbeat and positive, always sees things in a positive light, which is not at all the way the Shakespeare character is. And in retrospect, when I look back on my life, all the good we did have, the first love, the fact that, we could do all these things in a time when women couldn't, we had power. Whitney describes her as resplendent, so she's very, she's kind of liberated in a way that's, free of the stresses that Margaret 2 is experiencing.
Do the students need to know all of Henry VI and Richard III to understand the story of Margaret?
No, this play exists without it. And that's the whole point. We've got a show that, anyone can come and see and understand.
What was the process like in developing the character of Queen Margaret?
It's been very collaborative, but collaborative in the sense that as you watch, your acting partners make choices and come to new connections and understandings, you can build on those things as you create character and tell story and you're part of the play. If we're in a band, which instrument you're responsible for, and also knowing that even as you play, that you're in harmony with other notes, and which is really nice for Margaret as a character to know that you are not the only voice in the arc of this story, that there are other people who are counterbalancing the trajectory of who this person becomes.
We get to see what the Shakespeare version is experiencing, and then we get to talk to each other and look at that and talk about what could have been possibly going on in our minds or what was motivating what we were doing, because I think that is something we don't get from Shakespeare women a lot. A lot of men, it's like you have 4 soliloquies before you kill someone, and Margaret doesn't get that. It's not that we've crafted like one person who develops. I think we are all very different people, but then we get to talk to each other about how we bridge those gaps, both in the play and in our rehearsal of the play.
How does it feel bringing Shakespeare into the 21st century and bringing women to the forefront of the story?
what Whitney has tried to do is create descriptions of what happens that aren't the whole, we can't obviously do all three Henrys and Richard to show you why Margaret is the way she is. But Whitney has provided, through her own very special feminist lens, what this character has endured and what makes her the person that she is. And she can be perceived as cruel, as mad, but what we are trying to do is not just look at her as someone who is evil, because there's a line in the play. What do you say, Fiona? What is your line?
Shakespeare is saying that in order for a woman to survive and want power, she has to become evil.
I think the play and we are trying to show that that's not the case, that women in power are not a bad thing.
I think this play, in a lot of ways, is an example of like how to engage with these plays today at a time where we're always questioning how gender and how how women are allowed to operate in these plays. And it feels like sort of a loving and complex character analysis. This whole play is like how to go digging for information when all you see are speeches. Sort of as a learning lesson, if you were just to read this play, you might have a better understanding of how to go about finding a human being on the page, actually. And I bet even if if you saw this play and then you went back and read all of the Henrys, you might come to your own point of view about Margaret, but you'd be coming to the play asking different questions and really looking for her in a more purposeful way.
By the Queen is a survivor's tale. What does it take for the women of Shakespeare to survive?
I say all of Shakespeare's girls with epic love stories die. And even those without epic love stories. All of Shakespeare's women are smart. But Margaret seems to be smart and ruthless. And her ruthlessness has a cause and a reason. It's not just that she's, pathological. Her wit and her willingness to do the hardest thing there is to do, which is fight for what she wants. She fights for what she wants and gets it.
By Shakespeare rules, if you stick around, you end up dying. Like, I feel like the only way you don't die is if you, at least in the history tragedy realm, in the comedies, I guess you just have to get married at the end. But I'm thinking over it, and Margaret disappears for a while and then also leaves to go to France. Like, I feel like if you stick around, you will end up dead. But what Margaret does that is, condemned by the men, but I think lets her survive as long as she does, is she starts to fight and gain political power by the same paths that men do. She raises an army. She leads that army. She gets to, she takes on roles that I think, especially in that time, and still even today, are usually reserved for men.
The show opens with a reference to Destiny's Child's I'm a Survivor. What is this show's relationship to music?
We get to dance. That's really fun. There's quite a bit of, shenanigans going on. We dance and have a good time and party. And when we all get up and dance, I just feel the spirit of us in the room. So that's what, the music does for me, is it sort of liberates that joy.
Music functions largely in the piece. Our playwright is a musician as well. And so music often finds a position in the art that Whitney makes. And in our show in particular, it provides not just a tone for the action, but it also sometimes is an action, actually. It allows us to change scene, change our feelings about something, remake the world. It's sort of the pixie dust of the show in a lot of ways.
What is Margaret's relationship to the male/masc-aligned ensemble members?
Well, the male ensemble really make a lot of the Shakespeare possible. They're acting partners, and they populate the rest of the world of the plays, so that Margaret can sort of tell the story that they're trying to tell. There are a few different levels of relationships because the play has a few different modes of storytelling. So there are some times in which the Margarets are interacting with the ensemble the way actors do in a rehearsal room. And then there are some times when the Margarets are interacting with ensemble members as if they are characters in the Shakespeare plays. And I would say that in the Shakespeare world, the relationship is far more adversarial and tensious than it is in the other theatrical spaces in some ways. But there are also moments in the play where the ensemble members, will get really excited about, parts of the story, and they'll want to take the play over. And then the Margarets have to, sort of say, no.
Is there anything in Margaret's story you can relate to as a woman/femme-aligned person in the theater industry?
Well, it's a male-dominated field. So if you would like to be censored in any way, it requires a lot of thought.
There's a part in the play where the men, we try to transform the men into women. Rachel and Fiona both say things to these men that remind me of what you have to be a woman in the room, smile all the time, laugh a lot, how do I have to behave here? And women are always asking themselves that, in an audition situation, because we're always auditioning, especially, as actors, we're always auditioning. What do I have to do when I walk into a room and it's all mostly men?
In the show, Margaret talks about what she would write in a letter to her younger self. So, if you could write a letter to your younger self, what would you say?
Oh my God, I say it at the end of the play. I say it to Fiona, to Margaret 1. I say, don't carry too much. That would be what I would say to myself.
Yeah, care less what people think, but also maybe that's just a letter to my current self. That's not
I would say have more fun.
Mm-hmm.
Choose joy.
Lastly, give us 3 words you would use to describe your Margaret.
Smart, badass, unapologetic.
Funny, passionate, strong.
Sassy, reckless, and heartful.
Thank you for joining us for this Project Discovery Plus video study guide for By the Queen.
Tickets are on sale now at trinityrep.com/queen.